I have seen more bento boxes in the last week than her. Than what? That's not the point. Bento boxes are one of the biggest trends in web design, so let me show you how to build a fully responsive bento box in Figma. Let's go. Alrighty-o. Now, if you want to follow along, you can actually download this entire Figma file. There is a link in the description, so if you appreciate that, make sure to gently smash that like button. On the left-hand side in this file, I have provided you some of the visual assets that you can use for the example task. In the middle, you can see that I've actually provided you an example of the responsive bento box. So if you go ahead and just resize that, you can see it's perfectly responsive. And we're actually going to be using this to explain to you how to think about building something like this before we actually go ahead and do it. So let me go ahead and grab the pencil. Go grab a cup of coffee, grab some tea. I don't know what you're into. Grab whatever you're into, maybe even a pillow. Just hold that tight while I explain to you how we will actually approach this project. So let me go ahead and just change the stroke to white so you can see this clearly. Now, when we are designing and building responsive components or layouts in Figma, it's always good to know what we are trying to achieve before we try to do it, or else we're going to be convoluted with all the features. So here you can see that we have this entire section, and let's just call this a bento box, okay? So we have a box that has 2 rows of content. So we have the first row, and then we have the second row. Now the second row really is just a duplicate of the first one. Now inside the first row, we have 3 boxes, okay? So we have 1 box, we have 2, and then we have 3. Now, if you look at the behavior of what happens in this bento box, so let me just maybe hide the outlines. Let me just see, whoops, these ones as well. You can see that the one on the left-hand side, so take a look at this one carefully. It does not change. The width of that box does not change. The only 2 boxes that change are the middle one and the one on the right-hand side. And it's important that you notice this because we need to set special configurations before we actually go ahead and build it. On the second one, you can see that it's just a duplicate of the first, so I won't explain that too much. But you can see that once it hits a particular point, there's a measurement, there is a trigger point, there is a break point at when these 2 rows start to collapse, and you'll see that these 2 boxes move onto a second line. And that's called wrapping. You can see if we go further down, eventually there will be another breakpoint. Once this one hits a specific breakpoint, it starts to break and then it'll go onto the line below, just like that. Now that you understand how that's working and some of the physics behind the bento box, let me explain to you why that has happened. So let's go ahead and take a look at the bento box. The first card stays fixed. So you can see that the reason why this stays fixed is because I've actually set a min width of 480 pixels. That tells Figma that this content box or this box does not collapse any lower than 480. So once it hits 480, that's it. It doesn't get any smaller. So this is already at the width of 480 pixels. That's why it doesn't actually reduce in size. Now, if you take a look at the other ones, these boxes, they don't have a min width that is too close to 340 pixels right now. It's got a min width of 300 pixels. That means there are 40 pixels on both boxes where the box can still retract. So you can see it still has this amount of area from the red line to the blue line, that much space for it to contract before it starts to wrap onto the second line. So let's go ahead and take a look at that again. So you know now this one has a min width of 480 pixels, meaning that this does not change because it's already 480 pixels. These 2 are actually 340 pixels wide, but there is a min width of 300 pixels. So there's 40 pixels of area that can be collapsed. So let's go ahead and collapse this by 40 pixels. And then what happens? It collapses and wraps onto the second line. Now, the reason why that happens is because if you click onto the parent row, the box that contains the card, we have actually set the auto layout component to wrap. So that's really the general physics of this bento box. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and actually create it ourselves. Oh, and by the way, if you want to master Figma in just 10 hours, learning all the industry-leading techniques, tactics, and processes, then definitely check out my Figma Masterclass. We have over 7,000 students on this course with 5-star reviews. So if you want to check it out, there is a link in the description, and I've also attached a juicy 10% off coupon code. Back to the video. I'm going to go ahead and hit F on my keyboard and just simply draw down a wrapper. Now I'm going to call this bento box, not auto layout. Now, obviously, I love auto layout. So I practically turn everything into auto layout. Even if I could turn my fiance into an auto layout, I would actually turn her into auto layout as well. So I would actually hit Shift A, turn bento box into auto layout. And the reason why is because I want to be able to use these configurations and stack the 2 rows on top of each other. So vertical will be the direction. I want 20 pixels in between the 2 rows. As you can see, 20 pixels here. And I also want 20 pixels on the left and right over here on these sides. As you can see, we want to achieve that. And I don't need any padding or margins on the top and bottom. All right, so 240 pixels, that looks pretty good. The second thing I need to do is hit F on my keyboard once again, and I'm going to draw a rectangle inside here. All right, and I'm just going to draw it and expand it all the way across to make sure that the bento box is hitting the edges like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select bento box, change HUD contents to fixed width, because I want to make sure that this bento box doesn't change sizes based on the content inside. So I'm going to change it to fixed. The width will be always 240. And then the frame 2, which is going to be the first row, I'm going to rename this to row. Now, once again, auto layout this. So Shift A, turn row into auto layout. Now, the reason why is because I'm going to create 3 cards inside, spaced evenly with 20 pixels in between. So selecting the row, making sure that the direction is horizontal, the space between each element inside is going to be 20 pixels, and we can add padding to the left and right and 0 on the top and bottom. So the row has been complete. I'm going to hit F again on my keyboard, and I'm going to draw down a card. So this card, let me just make sure that this card is going to be, I believe it was 480 pixels. So add min width, and I'm going to hit 480 pixels. And you can see that this will automatically turn this card into 480. I'm going to hit Shift A and rename this to card. And then from there, I'm going to go ahead and select one of the images. So holding down Command, I can directly select an image over here. Command C or Control C on a Windows. And I'm just going to find my card, and I'm going to hit Command V or Control V on a Windows and pop my image inside. I'm going to go ahead and hit T and just click anywhere inside this card. And I'm just going to say, put some text here. So that could be a heading, it could be anything, and it will just pretty much go there. I'm going to go ahead and select the card, go over to auto layout, change the direction to vertical, and I'm just going to select the image and just move it above the text. So you can see that's all created. Now it's time to actually stylize our card because we've got all the content inside already. So I'm going to select the card. I'm going to make sure that the direction is vertical because we want the information stacked. I want everything in the center, just like that. I want to add 20 pixels space between the elements inside. And I also want to add 20 pixels to the left and right and top and bottom. The final thing I need to do is actually go ahead and add some curved corners. And there's one more thing. I'm going to go ahead and add a stroke and change the stroke color to maybe around 222, which is sort of like a light gray, a dark gray, sorry. So it looks pretty similar, as you can see. So now that's created, there's one last thing that I want to do. I want to actually make sure that the image is filling the container, so it's stretching all the way to the sides as much as it can, so it's truly responsive. But the last thing is making sure I click on the image, change fill to fit. As you can see, when it's filled, the image gets cropped at the top because it's prioritizing the width of the image. But if I prioritize it to fit, everything tends to fit inside the bounding box. So that is pretty much all we need to do for the first card. Now we need to go ahead and duplicate the card. So I'm going to hit Command D and I'm going to actually change the configuration for this card slightly. So for the second card, we want to go to the width and we want to change the min width to 300. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that card and that should work. I'm going to hold down Shift, select both cards and prioritize the behavior from hug contents to fill container. So this will actually force the two cards to fill the container depending on how wide it actually is. Now, the reason why nothing happened is because the row, which is the box that's containing the cards, right? This bounding box is currently set to fixed. So if we just change this to fill container, you can see that the bento box is 240 pixels wide. The row now is filling the container. It's forcing itself to the left and right edges. And then the first card is set to a width of 480 pixels, while the other two cards are filling the container as well. So these two will always, if I go ahead and just reduce the size, you can see that it will always reduce and the other one will stay fixed. So we've got the first row completed. Now I'm going to go ahead and select the row. I'm going to hit Command D and that will duplicate the row. I'll double click into the first card, hit right on my keyboard, right again, and now we have the two rows. So let's go ahead and just take a look at what this is going to do. So if I go ahead and just reduce the size, everything is working to plan. So we've got the two smaller cards resizing while the larger one is staying fixed. So to get to the point where it's truly responsive like this one, we need to go ahead and tweak the behavior just a little bit. So now that you understand how this has been constructed, we can now go ahead and select the two rows and change the direction from horizontal to wrap. And the reason why I did not do that initially is because I want you to understand how does this actually work on a horizontal behavior. Now that you understand what the limitations are, because once we reduce the size, it doesn't actually wrap the content, I now want to show you what wrapping does. So if we go ahead and actually tell the rows to wrap the content, if we go ahead and resize this, you can start to see that the actual boxes will actually go and resize and then wrap. Now, obviously, you can see that there are some slight tweaks that we need to do for the main card, which is because that we've changed the behavior to wrap, we need to now tell the first card to not hug itself, which means to hug the width of the content inside, but instead to also fill the container. So we're going to go ahead and actually go and change that to fill the container. And now if we go and resize this, you can see that it is perfectly responsive and it's actually forcing itself to fill the entire container. Now, I really do hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you liked it, make sure to gently smash that like button because it really does help out the channel. Subscribe for the diehard fans, and if you want to continue learning, you should definitely check out this video.